The first time the eyes stayed a moment too long, the room felt smaller, like the walls leaned in to listen. It happened in the kitchen, of all places, with the late sun pouring across the counter and the sound of a kettle complaining just before it boiled. A laugh slipped out light, easy, and the gaze met mine with something unpracticed and tender, like a secret that had just learned how to breathe. It should have ended there. A glance can be an accident. A smile can be just a mistake in the muscles, but this one chose to linger and I let it. He was not for me. That was the first rule, the only rule that seemed to matter. Best friend's brother, the type of boundary written in invisible ink and blood. Families and friendships are made of tacit agreements. Look but don't reach, admire but don't claim. And yet something about the way his name sounded in my mouth when I said hello, the way it softened the tongue and warmed the throat, told me I was already reaching, already claiming. I tucked the feeling away like a contraband note at the bottom of a bag, telling myself it would fade by morning. It did not, it ripened. Days layered into weeks, and the world found ways to conspire. Group dinners turned into shared cleanup at the sink, sleeves rolled, wrists wet. He'd hand me a dish towel, our fingers would graze, and a current would shiver up the arm to a place no towel could dry. In crowded rooms, voices lifted and stories tangled like string lights, but the air between us was its own quiet corner, private and unlit. Sometimes it felt like standing at the edge of a pool at night, dark, still, tempting, knowing one step forward would change the temperature of everything. It's funny what becomes a ritual in the beginning. The small, unspectacular things that later feel like sacred coordinates. A coffee placed closer than necessary. A chair pulled out and left a little too near. A jacket offered when the evening turned spiteful. Each gesture was ordinary. The gravity beneath it was not. I started to listen for footsteps that matched his pace, an easy stride I could recognize in a storm. I started to notice that laughter sounded different when it came from both of us at once, like harmony. We didn't talk about it. There was nothing to talk about, not officially. No confession had been uttered, no boundary had been broken, no promise had been made. This was the safest part, and therefore the most dangerous. Nothing acknowledged, everything implied. The first real warning arrived one night on a balcony with the city curled below like a sleeping animal. The others had gone inside to find more music and snacks. The air was cool, a little vain with its December clarity. He leaned on the railing, head tipped toward the sky as if counting the uncountable. When he turned to say something, anything, a joke, a complaint, my name was still in his mouth but softer, and he didn't say it so much as place it in the space between us. The way a person places a hand on a table when they're about to tell the truth. I shouldn't, he said, and then stopped. What? The question wasn't quite a question. It was permission hiding in a coat. This, he answered, and didn't move at all. The stillness was a map I could read with my pulse. I learned that longing has seasons. Spring is the glances that grow like small green things in a window box. Summer is the blaze of proximity, hands passing plates, knees almost touching under tables, the scent of a sweater borrowed for the night and returned too late. Autumn is the ache, the carefulness, the inventory of risks. Winter is the honesty, a starkness that makes every shape clear. On that balcony, winter arrived, the breath made clouds, the truth did too. Later, guilt would come, polite and insistent, like a relative who knocks instead of ringing the bell. But in those first weeks, desire wore the gentlest face. It took the form of late night conversations that meandered for hours, about nothing, about everything. Childhood stories, the scar no one sees, the song that fixes a day when the day won't fix itself. Some nights we spoke until the words tired themselves out and silence moved in, companionable and warm. I don't remember who initiated the first goodbye that lasted too long. I remember the pause, the electricity that gathered in it, the sense that if a breath landed in the wrong place, we would not be able to stay good. Then came the moment that split the before from the after so cleanly that even now it feels like a line drawn with a silver blade. A living room on a rain-soaked evening. Everyone had left. The air smelled like wet pavement and citrus dish soap. I reached for my bag. He reached for a glass. Our paths crossed in that mundane choreography. The touch was accidental, the way a few notes are sometimes played before a song begins. But the hand didn't move away. It stayed, a question made of skin, and my hand, traitor, saint, answered, "It is a myth that thunder is loudest outside the body." When the truth finally arrived, it came in a quiet so complete the beating of two hearts sounded like an orchestra warming up in another room. No dramatic declarations, no fireworks, no rescue from the rain. Just a head lowered, a breath shared, a kiss that landed like a vow spoken in a church with no witnesses. Not hungry, not hurried, but reverent, carefully unwrapping a gift both of us had been so certain would belong to someone else, somewhere else, some other version of our lives. After that, the world did what it always does when two people step across a line. It behaved as if nothing had changed, while everything had. Friends told stories over brunch. Phones blinked with ordinary notifications. The city kept its buses on time and its pigeons ridiculous, and yet inside, something foundational shifted. A new room opened where none had existed, and even when apart, I could walk into it and stand there, surrounded by the echo of a name said with care. The rebellion wasn't in the secrecy, it was in the tenderness. To want someone is easy, to want them in a way that makes the rest of the world safer, kinder, more honest. That felt like defiance. There were rules and reasons and loyalties that mattered, and those did not become less important because desire had found a voice. We negotiated with the guilt the way one bargains with weather. Pack a sweater, check the forecast, travel anyway. Every choice was made with two hands, open palms showing. If we were wrong, we would carry it. If we were right, we would earn it. He was careful with me in ways that didn't call attention to themselves. He remembered the small things, how crowds pull the shoulders up around the ears, how sweet tea turns teeth to glass, how certain songs can grow teeth and bite. When words weren't safe, his steadiness was. And I learned to meet him there, in the quiet courage of showing up fully. What we were building didn't need an audience. It needed a spine. There were conversations imagined and postponed. The best friend's face, the potential bruise on a history built from childhood summers and unflattering Halloween photos and shared victories only we understood. Love that is true does not step over the people who made us possible. It finds a way to bring them along. The path would be careful. The timing would be earned. Meanwhile, the heart learned to hold two truths like two hands, gratitude for the life that led to this threshold, and devotion to the one standing on the other side. Sometimes, late at night, the mind would play its cruelest games, flash a headline no one would write, rehearse a fallout no one had authored. Fear has the imagination of a novelist. But morning always arrived with the softer fact of what was real. The text that asked about the meeting, the photo of the sky at 6:14, the ordinary tenderness of two people choosing not just each other, but a way of being that felt clean, even in its complications. I used to think the beginning of a love story was a single spark, something that happened in a stunned instant and then expanded outward like light. Now I know it can also be a slow gathering of warmth, the careful accumulation of kindling, a cup of tea, a shared joke, a fingertip on a wrist, a name said like a promise. The spark didn't happen in the kiss. It happened in everything that made the kiss inevitable. It began where it shouldn't have, yes. but it led to a place where the soul could stand up straighter. No one tells you that the first act of falling in love is listening to the ways you've been half asleep, to the parts of yourself that only wake up in the presence of someone who sees them without flinching. That's what the glances were saying all along, wake up. That's what the laughter was hiding, the terror and the joy of being fully awake. And when the line was finally crossed, it was not a leap but a step, as natural as moving toward warmth when a door opens in winter. In the end, what felt forbidden was simply the truth arriving before permission did. It began so playfully that it almost felt safe. Teasing rolled off the tongue like sugar, a shield for truths neither of us could carry yet. The jokes were small boats we sent across a widening river, testing whether the other shore would receive them with a smile or sink them without mercy. Every time his grin returned to me, just a fraction softer than before, the current between us quickened. And then there were the near accidents, his shoulder brushing mine as we reached for the same glass, the charged pause inside a shared laugh, the way our knees learned each other's gravity beneath crowded tables. A language was forming that had no words and too much meaning. It was ridiculous how a hand could think. Before any decision had been spoken, fingers were already fluent. Passing him a dish felt like passing a secret. Thumb to knuckle, brief, deliberate, the whole body remembering more than it should from a moment that couldn't possibly feed it. It wasn't the contact alone, it was the intention living inside it. The softness was real, and it was hungry. Each touch wrote a sentence under the skin, a little trembling reminder that being seen this clearly is both a blessing and a flame. There was a night when the apartment was a halo of low lamps and the city exhaled rain. Conversations thinned and softened until only the two of us remained awake, listening to a playlist that understood too much. He sat across from me on the rug, cross-legged, elbows on knees, like a confession disguised as rest. He talked about childhood, the kind of loneliness that grows in the back row of a class picture, and the way certain seasons make the bones ring hollow. The truth came unadorned, not trying to perform, and that's what made it catastrophic. Vulnerability has its own seduction, and what ignited between us in that honest air wasn't lust dressed up in romance. It was the ache to be witnessed without armor, to be held at the exact temperature of the soul. The teasing still happened because ceremonies need laughter, but the undercurrent shifted. The eyes didn't move away as quickly. The pauses lengthened, the ones wrapped in the softest silence, those delicate spaces where a person decides whether to step forward or keep living from the doorway. I found myself memorizing ordinary things that felt like coordinates, where his voice dipped when tired, how the brow softened during stories about his sister, the way his hands turned careful when offering anything fragile, even a cup of tea. The noticing itself became tender. Sometimes tenderness scared me more than desire. Desire was a bright, knowable fire. Tenderness asked for surrender. One afternoon, the power went out. A storm had carved its name across the grid, and the rooms fell into a gentle dusk. He lit a candle that flickered like a heartbeat and leaned against the counter, the soft gold climbing his face. We joked about dramatic novels and destiny being cliché, but even the laughter had a hush to it. He reached across the island for a spoon and somehow also reached across something bigger. When our fingers met, it wasn't greedy. It asked a question that lived below language. Are you here with me? Not just now, but truly here. I answered by staying. We could have said we were only being warm. We could have folded it into the file labeled harmless, temporary, foolish. But innocent things can still be holy. And what moved between us felt more sacred than any small lie we might have used to keep our comfort. The world outside kept doing what it does, notifications, obligations, the rhythm of days that pretend they are all the same. But inside that dim kitchen, a new gravity was born. It wasn't heavy, it was exact. The next days were careful, not out of fear of being seen, but from a reverence for what was being built. We didn't rush. We let our conversations meander like rivers taking the longer, wiser path. We walked at night. The way streetlights scattered across wet pavement looked like the universe practicing tenderness. He told me the dream he never says out loud, the one that scares him because it matters. I told him about the version of home I refused to surrender again. When he listened, the listening was warm, not performative. When he spoke, the words came with their sleeves rolled up, honest and ready. Desire, when it is patient, can heal old bruises on the spirit. It taught me to inhabit my own breath differently. I began to notice the exact moment my shoulders relaxed around him, a surrender like opening a window in a stale room. It was unnerving to be seen so precisely and not judged for it. To be witnessed with kindness is a kind of intimacy no night could outshine, and yet the body is part of the choir too. A hand at my back while crossing the street, a coat shrugged around my shoulders when the wind remembered winter, a palm finding mine under the table during a conversation too sharp to navigate alone. Each touch said I'm here without staking a claim in neon. Nothing flashy, everything true. Of course there were boundaries, lines drawn with care because we respect what holds us. The fact of who he was in my life's constellation, how close our circles overlapped made us deliberate. Love that is real doesn't trample context, it studies it. So we learned to translate our hunger into gentleness, to bend the urgency into something that could last. The wanting never cooled, it clarified. The more we honored the world around us, the more the world inside brightened. There was an evening when the living room wore twilight like silk. We were close but not quite touching, the kind of closeness that taught patience how to sing. He reached for a book on the table, paused, and traced a small circle on the spine with his thumb. My eyes followed the motion and then returned to his face, where something unguarded had risen, humility, maybe, or relief. He inhaled as if gathering himself and said my name so softly it felt like a vow choosing its first words. The sound traveled all the way through me, gentle as rain on a roof. We didn't rush toward each other. We let the moment breathe until it knew its own shape. When the kiss came, it didn't declare an emergency. It arrived like a long, awaited letter, opened slowly, read carefully, pressed to the chest in gratitude. It tasted like what we had already shared, quiet jokes, held gazes, the scent of rain, the discipline of restraint. Nothing about it was performance. Everything about it was permission, not permission to take, but to give. To give the truth a place to live where it wouldn't have to hide. People mistake innocence for ignorance, but innocence can be a form of courage. We chose to keep our care unjaded, to touch as if meeting the world with clean hands. It was not naive. It was defiant. We refused to insult what we felt by hurrying it into an easy narrative. Instead, we let desire and kindness braid together until they were indistinguishable. The wanting was real, undeniable. The love was the discipline that shaped it into something beautiful. He once asked what scared me most. Losing this, I wanted to say, not the shape of it, not the logistics, but the quality. The way we kept choosing the gentler path, even when the louder one waved its arms. I feared waking one morning and discovering we had traded grace for noise. So I answered the way I wanted to live, by naming what I trusted instead. I told him I trusted his steadiness, the way he kept his word even when no one was watching, the way his laughter never tried to cover the truth, but to make room for it. He nodded, as if I had said something about him that he recognized. Then he took my hand, only that, and I felt the shy courage of it bloom along my arm. The night we finally let the world inside our world, we did it with care. Not a spectacle, but an honest conversation that respected every history involved. There were pauses, there were questions, there was a tenderness that kept refilling the room whenever fear tried to empty it. Later, walking home under a sky clear enough to keep, He said thank you like a promise. I answered without words, the same way we started, with a touch, trembling a little hesitant yes, but hungry for the kind of connection that turns two hearts into a shelter. Love didn't arrive as fire to burn everything down. It arrived as light that showed us where to step. The guilt lived in the body like a shadow that refused to rest. Every heartbeat carried its weight, an ache that pulsed beneath even the lightest moments. Wanting something that shouldn't be touched is its own kind of hunger, not sharp, but steady, like a slow burn that teaches patience through pain. The more the heart resisted, the more it learned that resistance was a form of remembering. Every attempt to silence the feeling only made it louder, more insistent, more alive. The days blurred into a rhythm of restraint and surrender. The voice on the other end of the phone became a lifeline. Late night calls, half-whispered words meant for no one else, became the language of two souls pretending not to need what they already were. The hours stretched thin, filled with confessions spoken in careful tones. It wasn't always about love. Sometimes it was just about being understood in a way that didn't require translation. The way silence could sit between words and still feel complete, that's how connection deepened. Each conversation carved a space where truth could breathe. The laughter carried a softness, the kind that hides pain without lying about it. There were stories shared that belonged to no one else, memories unwrapped like fragile letters. The kind of vulnerability that could undo a person if left in careless hands. And yet, there was no carelessness here, only trembling honesty, like light leaking through a curtain just before dawn. The guilt wasn't about betrayal. It was about inevitability. Love didn't ask for permission. It demanded surrender. Each time the voice whispered good night, it felt like a promise breaking and being made at the same time. The sound lingered long after the call ended, an echo in the quiet room that refused to fade. There was something sacred in it, a knowing that this was bigger than the rules that tried to contain it. Meeting in person was both salvation and punishment. The air changed when proximity replaced imagination. The warmth of being close made every boundary feel thinner, fragile. The eyes spoke first, holding too long, searching too deeply. There was safety in the gaze and danger too. Every smile carried memory, every breath felt shared. Words stumbled, careful, afraid to break the illusion of control. But hearts don't obey reason. They recognize themselves before the mind can catch up. There were moments when the world disappeared, the sound of rain on windows, the glow of city lights bending through glass, the stillness of being near enough to feel the rhythm of another heartbeat, even when no one moved. That stillness was louder than any declaration. It said everything. It said, this is love, even if it shouldn't be. This is truth, even if it hurts. But love born in quiet comes with its own storms. The guilt was not just moral. It was existential, the knowledge that something pure could still cause pain to others, that love and wrong could live inside the same breath. It tore at the conscience, left restless nights filled with unasked questions. Could something so real also be so wrong? Could two people who found each other in such light also live in shadow? And yet, every time the heart tried to retreat, it found itself drawn back. Not by desire alone, but by something deeper, the recognition that love doesn't always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes it finds us through impossible doors. Sometimes it comes disguised as the one we were warned against. Sometimes it's the hand that holds us steady when the world feels unbearable. The surrender came slowly. It didn't arrive in grand gestures or dramatic words. It came in small, human ways, a message sent at midnight just to say still awake. A quiet check-in after a hard day, the sound of a laugh that made the air feel lighter. Love doesn't always announce itself with fire. Sometimes it whispers, and the whisper becomes home. There were times when silence was safer than truth, when all that could be offered was presence, sitting together, saying nothing, letting the nearness do the talking. The warmth of that silence was its own confession. It was enough, it was everything. The guilt began to shift. It didn't vanish, but it softened. It became the shadow of something sacred, proof that this love still had conscience, still remembered what mattered. What once felt forbidden began to feel inevitable. The heart stopped apologizing for being alive. Love, after all, is not a crime against the soul. It is the soul finally recognizing itself. There was a night when everything quieted. The world outside was sleeping. The call lasted longer than usual. The pauses stretched, heavy with unspoken words. On the other end, breathing soft, steady, real. The kind of breathing that tells you someone is thinking the same thought, feeling the same ache. No promises were made, no futures planned, just the simple, unbearable truth that neither could let go. Love, at its deepest, is not about possession, it's about surrender. It's not about claiming someone, it's about giving yourself away piece by piece, heartbeat by heartbeat, until all that's left is truth. It doesn't demand proof, it just asks to be lived. There were days when the weight of it felt impossible, when distance was mercy and closeness was chaos. But even then, even in the quiet rebellion of restraint, love persisted. It lived in the smallest details, the remembered tone of voice, the scent left behind, the unspoken knowing that whatever happens next, something inside had already changed forever. Because surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to the pull that feels written in the bones, to the connection that refuses to fade. To love like that is to let go of control, to allow the soul to be undone and rebuilt by another's presence. It's not easy and it's never clean, but it's real, and sometimes real is worth every scar. In the end, love didn't ask to be defined. It asked to be felt fully, honestly, without apology. And when it spoke, it didn't sound like victory or loss. It sounded like a heartbeat learning a new rhythm. It sounded like surrender, whispering the only name it ever needed to. When love like that enters, the air itself feels different. Even the simplest moments, the quiet between sentences, the pause before a breath, carry a weight that wasn't there before. It isn't just about feeling something new, it's about unlearning everything that came before it. What used to matter starts to fade, and what once seemed impossible becomes the only truth that makes sense. That's what real love does. It doesn't just fill a space, it remakes the whole world. In the beginning, it felt almost unbearable, this awareness of another soul so close, so alive within reach. It was like standing too near a flame and realizing that even if you burned, you wouldn't step away. There was no grand declaration, no rehearsed moment of surrender. It happened in pieces, a glance that lingered too long, a conversation that felt too honest, the silence afterward that said everything words could not. It was terrifying to feel so open, to see the reflection of your own heart in someone else's eyes and know you could never close that door again. The days that followed were lessons in contradiction. Love softened everything and made it harder all at once. The mornings seemed brighter, the air gentler, yet every joy carried the shadow of what it cost. To love like that meant to risk everything, the calm, the certainty, the person you thought you were. There was no way to go back. Every heartbeat became a vow, every breath a quiet surrender to something far larger than reason. It wasn't a love that asked to be tamed, it demanded honesty, the kind that stripped away all the careful versions of self built for survival. There was no pretending anymore, no half-truths or polite masks. Every flaw, every fear, every hidden piece came forward under that light, and instead of turning away, love stayed. It looked at the mess, at the imperfect heart trembling with doubt, and said, "I see you. I choose you still." That kind of acceptance reshapes everything. It teaches forgiveness, not the easy kind given to others, but the harder kind you learn to offer yourself. The guilt that once haunted every touch began to change. It didn't vanish, it transformed into reverence. What once felt forbidden now felt inevitable, as though life had simply been waiting for this collision. Love stopped being a rebellion and became a kind of truth, one that existed beyond permission. The world outside might never understand, but inside that connection, everything was clear. It wasn't about ownership or escape. It was about recognition, about two souls who met in the same ache and decided not to look away. There were nights when the silence between words spoke louder than anything said aloud. Sitting together, no pretense left, the heartbeat of the world seemed to slow. Even the smallest gestures, hands brushing, a shared breath, the warmth of presence, became sacred. There was no performance in it, no demand. Just a quiet knowing that love could exist without needing to prove itself. It was enough to be there, to feel seen in the dark, and yet, transformation never comes without loss. The old life began to loosen its grip, quietly at first, then completely. Friends who didn't understand drifted to the edges, priorities shifted, time stretched and folded in strange ways. There was grief in that letting go, grief for the simplicity that could never return. But underneath the ache was peace, the kind that comes only after truth has burned away everything that isn't real. Love didn't just change the heart, it redefined what home meant, what joy felt like, what silence could hold. The world outside kept moving, unaware. People laughed, traffic hummed, seasons turned, but inside, the measure of everything changed. A song once ordinary could stop the heart. The smell of rain could pull tears from nowhere. Even loneliness felt different, not emptiness, but memory, the echo of something holy that once touched the soul and left it glowing. To be transformed by love is to never be the same again, even in solitude. Forgiveness came slowly, not as an act but as an understanding. Love teaches that perfection is not the goal, presence is. To love fully is to stand naked before the world and not flinch, to accept that some things are meant to hurt and still be grateful for the ache. The pain was proof that it mattered, that something real had happened. It wasn't tragedy, it was evidence of being alive. There came a moment, quiet and unnoticed, when fear no longer ruled. The need to hide, to explain, to justify faded. What remained was calm, not the calm of indifference, but of acceptance. Love had done its work. It had carved the heart open and left it larger, capable of holding both joy and sorrow without breaking. That's what transformation truly is, not escape, but expansion. Even after the last goodbye, love stayed. It lived in the smallest corners, a remembered laugh, a song on a passing radio, the way light fell on an empty chair. It didn't demand presence to exist. It had already woven itself into the fabric of being. The heart no longer needed to chase or cling. It simply carried. The person who existed before that first forbidden kiss could never have understood this kind of peace. The one who existed after could not imagine life without it. In the end, love didn't leave. It simply changed shape, turning from fire to warmth, from ache to understanding, from longing to light. It stopped asking to be held and started teaching how to hold everything. And even now, when the world feels heavy or the nights too long, the memory of that love still breathes quietly beneath the ribs, reminding that once it was real, once it burned, and once it made a soul new. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't let it fade. Hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay close, because every week a new story unfolds, one that might sound a little too much like your own heart. Love isn't always perfect. It's messy, forbidden, breathtaking, and real. Until next time, hold onto your fire, forgive your past, and never stop believing in true love with deep soul. This isn't just a story, it's a feeling. And it's only the beginning.